the last part of my book, which is the last part of my message to you, relates to our relationship to animals. And the good news is that we can be a very virtuous species. The not so good news, in fact, the paradox is that as our knowledge of them, our knowledge of animals goes up, it's at a higher level than ever before, our treatment of them lags further and further behind, because we still live according to what I would call a might makes right way of thinking with non-human animals. That is, we do with them as we please because we have the power to do so. And I don't mean across the board, but I mean institutionally in a global sense. We kill more animals now, we will kill more in 2010, I'm sorry to say, than we have at any year in history. And I suspect 2009 would have been the previous record. And that's really just for two reasons. One is more humans, and two is more meat consumption. Meat consumption is maybe hovering fairly stably in the West, and there's more and more vegetarian and vegan restaurants. You hear more about that. So that's encouraging signs, and there's legislation that's changing to protect animals. It's beginning to be enacted. But in a global sense, particularly China and India, meat consumption is going up pretty rapidly. As we're beginning to come to our senses in our relationship to animals and our treatment of them, some of these other countries are rushing to westernize and catch up. And China in particular has doubled its meat consumption in the last 10 years and is now the #1 meat-consuming nation in the world. It's far behind us per capita, or they eat far less meat per capita, but by dint of a population that's about 4 times as big, in total numbers, they consume more meat. And why am I talking about meat? Well, frankly, it's where the rubber meets the road on our relationship with animals. There's other issues, you know, the use of animals in research and testing, very important issue. Maybe consumes up to 100 million sentient animals a year. There's hunting, there's fishing, there's animals in entertainment, rodeos, and other things like that. So there's a lot of other issues that are all important and need to be broached, but really there's not much we can do to advocate for animals if we do so between bites of a cheeseburger. As long as we're eating animals, the animal issue is not going to get much better very fast. And really there's a lot of other issues that go along with that. Humans now, or at least in the West, we're pretty aware of the human health implications of eating high on the food chain, with the so-called diseases of affluence: heart disease, cancer, stroke, diabetes, which is thought to be predicted now to be afflicting perhaps 1 in 2 Americans in another few decades. An astonishing statistic. And of course the environmental impacts of meat consumption, eating high on the food chain. Why are hawks rarer than snakes, which are rarer than frogs, which are rarer than grasshoppers? And there's much more grass just in biomass, not just numbers. Well, it's because the higher you eat on the food chain, the less efficient it is. It takes a lot of energy is lost at each trophic level. So it's just simply unsustainable to feed 6.5 billion humans on a meat-centered diet. So there's a lot of good reasons why we need to cut down on meat consumption. And that's really the issue I focus on, because as I say, if we don't address that issue, nothing's really going to get fixed. So if you eat meat, I encourage you to eat less, or even better, go vegetarian, or even better, go vegan. Because that's the best thing you can do. That's the holy grail of personal activism for animals. So that's my main message to you, and I really appreciate you listening to me, and I'd be happy to take any questions.